My name is Samantha, and I am the eldest of 3 children. My father runs his own business, and my mother works part-time at some trading company. There are also twins, Lisa and Harry, who are 6 years younger than me. They have always been the golden children, those who in the eyes of our parents could not do anything wrong. Since the twins were born, my role in the family has changed. I stopped being just an older sister. I became their nanny, housekeeper, and personal assistant. While my peers were enjoying childhood, I was running the household. She picked up the twins from school, helped with homework, and took them to classes. Music, sports, additional courses. I was their shadow, accompanying them everywhere. The house was also my responsibility. Cleaning, cooking, grocery shopping, it all fell on my shoulders. Lisa and Harry were returning from school, scattering backpacks wherever they wanted, leaving a mess behind, and no one even thought to remind them of the need to clean up. It was as if it was part of their role in the house to create chaos that I had to eliminate. It seemed to me that I was not living in my family, but in some strange mechanism where my function was to fix, clean, and maintain order. Her parents didn't seem to notice. Or they pretended not to notice. They're used to the fact that I'm doing it on my own. But one day, when I was about 15, I decided that I couldn't do it anymore. I plucked up the courage and started a conversation over dinner. "Mom, Dad," I began, trying to keep my voice level, "why am I the only one doing all this? Lisa and Harry never help with anything." Mom put down her fork and looked at me with surprise and some kind of bewilderment, as if I had asked a strange question. "Darling," she said, "that's how families always work. The older child has more responsibilities." I felt the blood rush to my cheeks. "But that's not true," I protested. "I've been to Sarah and Jessica's homes, and all the responsibilities there are shared equally among all the children." Mom's face changed. She frowned, and her voice hardened. "These families are raising their children incorrectly." Lisa and Harry looked at each other across the table, exchanging knowing grins. I could see how much they liked what they heard. They knew that nothing would change for them, and they were happy. Later that week, when resentment was still burning in me, I tried to talk to them directly. It was evening, and we were doing our homework together. I was sitting across from them, holding a book in my hands, but my thoughts were not about tasks and texts. "Why don't you ever help around the house?" I asked, trying to sound calm. "It's not difficult. You can also sometimes clean up or at least not throw things around." Lisa rolled her eyes. "Mom says we need to focus on studying and studying," she replied indifferently. "This is our main task." "Yes," Harry added, grinning. "You have to do the rest like Mom said." I felt something inside me shrink. I knew I wouldn't get help from them. It wasn't just about household chores. It was as if they enjoyed making my life difficult. They deliberately threw things around, made a mess, broke something, and then blamed me for it. Sometimes they openly lied to their parents, claiming that I hadn't helped them with their homework or hadn't bought what they asked for. I tried to make excuses, but my parents didn't seem to hear me. It was easier for them to believe in the guilt of me, the eldest daughter, than to imagine that their perfect twins could be unfair. It has become a part of my existence to always be in the background, always to remain guilty. The last year of high school was supposed to be a time of new opportunities for me. A time of dreams, plans, trips to university campuses. I imagined how I would collect documents, think about the future, and make plans for a life away from home. But instead, every day became a reminder that my role in the family was to serve others. I was something like an inconspicuous mechanism that keeps order while others can just live. I remember that evening especially clearly. I was sitting at the kitchen table with college brochures in front of me. I studied them, imagining how I could choose my path and build my life. But when my parents returned home, there was an expression on their faces that I knew all too well. It was the expression of people about to deliver bad news. "Samantha, we need to talk about college," Dad began, avoiding eye contact with me. Mom sat down next to me, her voice trembling. "We have studied our finances, and we just don't have the money for your higher education. All our savings should be used for Lisa and Harry's future education." The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat and looked at the pamphlets, which now seemed to mock me with their promises of a bright future and new beginnings. Each of them seemed like a door that had suddenly been slammed in my face. I worked so hard, I believed that I deserved a chance. "But I have good grades," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can get a scholarship." "The decision is final," Mom interrupted me. There was no doubt or pity in her voice. "We have to think about Lisa and Harry's future." "What about my future?" I asked, fighting back tears. Dad looked down and awkwardly patted me on the shoulder. "You're resourceful, darling. You'll figure something out." At that moment, I felt as if something inside me had cracked. I nodded slowly to avoid further conversation and went to my room. That night, I lay in the dark, listening to the cheerful laughter coming from the twins' room. They already knew. I could tell by their looks at dinner, by their smug grins. They got everything. I'm nothing. But instead of breaking down, I got angry. She was very angry. I wasn't going to stay in the shadows. I wasn't going to be a perpetual babysitter and maid. The next day, I started looking for a job. I sent out resumes, called, wrote, went to interviews. And 2 weeks later, she found an entry-level position in a small corporation. It wasn't a dream, a simple job, low-paying, with no prospects. But they paid enough to rent a tiny apartment there. And I took it off. The day after graduation, I packed up my things and moved in. No tears, no goodbyes. Mom asked if I wanted to stay a little longer, but there was no particular desire in her voice to keep me. Perhaps, deep down, she even breathed a sigh of relief. The years that followed were difficult. I've been working like hell. I took every opportunity. If there was a chance to learn something, I jumped at it. If it was possible to voluntarily join the project, I did it first. I knew I didn't have a college degree, but I had real-world experience. An experience that was given to me with sweat and blood. And a determination that was hard to compete with. Slowly, step by step, I climbed the career ladder. I endured humiliation, sleepless nights, and ridiculous assignments, but I didn't give up. I forced myself to be better, smarter, faster. I studied everything I could, learned from my mistakes, and didn't let myself relax. Meanwhile, the twins have received their higher education. As planned, the parents found the money to pay for their education, housing, and expenses. They even went into debt so that the twins wouldn't need anything. Lisa graduated from the university with a degree in business administration, and Harry graduated with a degree in logistics. But here's the irony: Lisa can't hold down a job for more than 3 or 4 months. She always has an excuse. The job is boring, the boss is incompetent, the tasks are not inspiring enough for her talents. Harry got a job as a warehouse manager, a job that clearly didn't require the expensive education his parents had gone into debt for. But every time we get together for family meetings, they don't miss the opportunity to remind us about their diplomas. "You know, back in college," Lisa began, giving me that sidelong glance she'd honed over the years. And Harry would always put in his own. Yes, university was such an important stage. And I was just sitting there sipping wine and thinking about my salary, which had long exceeded their combined income. Sometimes I had to hide my smile behind a glass when they started bragging. They lived from paycheck to paycheck, took out loans, saved on everything, but proudly recalled their university years. One day, during my lunch break, I was mindlessly scrolling through the tape on my phone. and suddenly my eyes caught on the photo. My cousin Sarah was standing in an emerald green dress, beaming at the camera. The caption read, "I can't wait for Aunt Margaret's big party." Mom's birthday was just a few weeks away. But I didn't know anything about the holiday. No talking, no hints. Maybe I jumped to conclusions. Maybe it's not what I thought. But something inside squeezed, gripping my heart in a cold grip. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before I typed, "Beautiful dress." What holiday? The answer came almost immediately, Aunt Margaret's 55th birthday party. It's going to be amazing. Have you already started planning your outfit? I felt a wave of cold go through my body. My mother. My house. And I, her eldest daughter, didn't know anything about it. My hands were shaking as I opened the contacts on my phone and clicked on my mother's number. She answered on the fourth ring. "Samantha, what happened?" "I'm pretty busy right now." Her voice was flat, businesslike, as if I'd called her about some boring formality. "Mom," I began, trying to keep my voice calm, but it was shaking anyway. "I just saw Sarah's post about your birthday." Why didn't I know anything about this? There was a long, lingering pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her sigh, like a harbinger of what was about to come. And when she finally spoke, her voice was laced with that familiar, condescending tone I'd heard since childhood. In a tone that was as much disdainful as it was tired. "Oh, well, Samantha," she began, as if debating whether to say more. "I didn't invite you because I don't want you to be there." I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it as if it had just electrocuted me. Of course, I must have misheard. It couldn't be true. I put it back on and asked, "What do you mean? Don't you want me to be at your birthday party?" I'm your daughter." Another pause. Another heavy sigh. "Yeah, well," she finally said, clearing her throat. "The thing is, Samantha, this is going to be a pretty prestigious event. There will be a lot of important people there, your father's associates, friends from the country club. And, to be honest, it would be awkward for me to introduce you." Awkward? I felt like an icy wave was washing over my consciousness, but I still clung to the hope that it was a misunderstanding. "You don't have a college degree, Samantha," she continued, as if explaining something obvious. "What would I say when people ask what you do?" That would be inconvenient. I was sitting there clutching my phone, listening to my own mother basically telling me that I wasn't good enough. Not worthy enough for her guests, her company, her own family. And Lisa and Harry? I knew the answer, but I asked the question as if I hoped she would say something different. "Of course they're invited," she said, sounding like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "They are college graduates. They understand how to behave in a refined society." I thought about Lisa, who couldn't hold a job for more than a few months, and Harry, who worked in a warehouse. But they had degrees. So they were worthy of attending my mother's party. But I'm not. "I understand," I said. My voice sounded strange, detached, as if it belonged to someone else. "So that's what you really think of me." There was an exasperated sigh on the other end of the line. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Samantha. That's why I didn't want this conversation. You always turn everything into a scene." Those words hit me like no slap in the face would. I always knew that Mom preferred twins. She knew that her gaze was softer and her smile warmer when it came to them. But this was different. It wasn't just a preference. It was a casual but merciless confession. An admission that she's ashamed of me. That I, her eldest daughter, am not worthy to be with them. I barely slept that night. I tossed and turned in bed, my mother's words spinning in my head, echoing in my heart. I remembered every little thing, every time I had to give in, when I was put in second place, when I was told, "You can do it," You'll find a way out on your own. I thought about my job, about how many years I've been achieving everything on my own, without anyone's help. I was thinking about how much it cost me to build my life. By morning, I had convinced myself of one thing: my father could not agree with this. He was always more reasonable, less harsh. Sometimes it seemed that he also gravitated towards the twins, but not so obviously. I had to hear him. To hear what he thinks about it. I went to my parents. I'd been rehearsing what I'm going to say all the way. I ran through possible answers in my head, trying to imagine how he would justify his mother's words, how he would soften them. I was hoping he'd say it was a mistake. That this is a misunderstanding. When I arrived at the house, I immediately noticed that Lisa and Harry's cars were parked in front of the entrance. So they were at home. The whole family is here. Great. It's just like I wanted it to be. Mom opened the door, and her face immediately clouded. Samantha, what are you doing here? I didn't explain. She just said, I need to talk to Dad. I walked past her without waiting for an invitation. Everyone was sitting in the living room, as I expected. Dad's in his chair. Lisa and Harry sprawled on the couch as if they owned the place. Mom followed me, still frowning. Dad, I began. My voice was shaking, but I forced myself to keep talking. Did Mom tell you about our conversation yesterday? He looked at me, avoiding my eyes, as if there was a particularly interesting pattern somewhere on the carpet in front of him. He shifted in his chair, as if the outcome of the conversation depended on it. Yes, he finally said. She told me. What do you think of that? I knew the answer. I felt him. But I asked anyway, hoping for a miracle. He didn't answer for a long time, and then, avoiding my gaze, he said, I think your mother is right. It would have been better if you hadn't come. Those words hit me like a slap in the face. I slowly looked around the room, peering into the faces of the people who were supposed to be my family. The people who were supposed to be my loved ones, my support. But all I saw was coldness and alienation. All of you, do you really think so? My voice was low, but there was pain in every word. Lisa rolled her eyes, her lips curling into a tired smile. No one wants you there, she said, as if it were a matter of course. Harry nodded dumbly. Can't you just accept it without turning it into a drama? I looked at them, and I couldn't believe that all this was really happening. So, none of you see what's wrong with excluding me from a family holiday? I paused, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. Don't you understand how unfair this is? It's been like this all my life. The twins are favorites, and I've always been in the background. You don't even see me as part of this family anymore. Lisa jumped up, her eyes flashing with anger. She pointed her finger at me as if accusing me. That's why we don't want you there. You're a drama queen, Samantha. You're always making scenes, always reacting negatively to everything. Every time something good happens to us, you try to ruin everything with your attitude. I started, but Lisa didn't let me get a word in. You're just jealous because Harry and I have achieved something, and you. I interrupted, my voice ringing with rage. Have you achieved it? What exactly? Lisa, you can't hold down a job for more than 3 months. And you, Harry, work in the warehouse. Everything you've achieved is a joke. There was a ringing silence in the room. Mom gasped, as if I'd just done something terrible. Her hand clutched onto the pearl necklace as if it was the only thing that could keep her from fainting. Samantha, she whispered, as if I had insulted her personally, how can you say that? I turned to my father, looking for some sign of support, some word that could stop this nightmare. But his face was set in stone. Cold. Someone else's. I think it's time for you to leave, he said firmly, not meeting my eyes. This conversation is over. Leave our house immediately. For a moment, I froze, not believing that I was hearing this. But then, without saying another word, I turned around and left. The door slammed shut with such force that the glass rattled. I got into the car, my heart pounding somewhere in my throat, and before starting the engine, I looked at the windows of the living room. Their silhouettes were already scurrying around the room. They were probably discussing my dramatic departure. But I didn't care. They showed their true colors. Finally. Irrevocably. They say revenge is a dish that is served cold. But sometimes life gives you an opportunity that you can't miss. And this opportunity appeared 2 weeks after that ill-fated conversation. I had lunch at a small cafe in the city center. Not where I usually went, but my favorite place turned out to be crowded, and I had to look for an alternative. I was sitting by the window, flipping through my phone and waiting for an order, when my gaze accidentally caught on a familiar silhouette in the corner. My mother. She was sitting in the far corner, trying to remain inconspicuous. A wide-brimmed hat almost hid her face, but I would have recognized her perfect posture and the way she held her head anywhere. But there was one detail that made me freeze. She wasn't alone. Sitting across from her was a man I'd never seen before. He was in his early 40s, well-dressed, and his business suit fit him flawlessly. And it definitely wasn't my father. I was watching. The man was saying something, and Mom was laughing, but not like at home, not forced, not fake. She giggled like a girl in love. And at some point, he reached across the table and lightly touched her hand. She didn't put it away. Conversely, my phone was in my hands before I had time to think about what I was doing. I pretended to be browsing social media, carefully aiming the camera. A click. One more touch. A click. A light laugh. A click. They sat there for about an hour. Then they got up, smiling, and headed for the exit. I waited. A few minutes later, they got into a black Mercedes. I started the car and followed them, keeping a safe distance. They weren't in a hurry. They drove slowly, talking animatedly about something. When the car stopped at a red light, I managed to take some clear pictures. Their lips closed in a kiss, long, passionate, forgetting about everything in the world. They drove up to the Grand Plaza. I parked across the street and watched them get out, holding hands, like teenagers, in love, carefree. I took them on video. How they log in, how they register. How they stand at the elevator, not looking up from each other. At home, I started planning. First of all, do a quick internet search. The license plate of the man my mother was with took me to his social media profiles. It turned out to be easier to find him than I expected. James Martinez is a successful real estate developer, an office in the city center, married, with 3 children. Family photos, corporate photos, posts about business achievements. A perfect picture of an ideal life. I spent the next few days in careful preparation. Everything had to be perfect. I learned it from the best. First, I professionally printed out the photos in a large format. Every shot was perfect, especially the shots of them kissing in the car. I saved the footage at the hotel entrance and the moment when they held hands on a USB drive. There were also videos, short but eloquent. I chose the most elegant gift box I could find. Cream color with gold trim, exquisite and restrained. How my mother loved me. I carefully rolled each photo into a tube and tied it with a thin silk ribbon. Very stylish. Very sophisticated. It's just like my mom insisted all my life, everything has to be perfect, Samantha. The greeting card was the finishing touch. I wrote Mr. Martinez's full name and address, carefully writing out each letter. Inside is a short note. I thought you might be interested in finding out who your husband really is. This postcard was meant for his wife. Mom mentioned her once when she was talking about the guests invited to the birthday party. I knew she would be there. I closed the box, tied it with a gold ribbon, and decorated it with a small, delicate bell. She looked like an expensive gift, immaculate, perfect, elegant. No one will suspect what's inside until it's too late. I've arranged everything in advance. The courier was supposed to deliver the package at exactly 8:30 p.m., exactly at the moment when, according to Sarah, they would start opening gifts. Everything had to happen quickly, without failures. In the evening, at the appointed time, I sat in my apartment, nervously checking my phone. Every few minutes, as if something more than just waiting depended on it. The notification arrived at 20:32. The package has been successfully delivered. Now all that remained was to wait. I didn't expect to have to wait long. The next morning, the phone rang at 7 in the morning. It was Sarah. Her voice was trembling with excitement. "Oh, my God, Samantha, you won't believe what happened at the party last night." She spoke hurriedly, not letting me get a word in. "It was crazy. This is madness." I kept quiet, letting her talk. Everything was going exactly as Aunt Margaret wanted. Everything is perfect, exquisite, just the way she likes it. Guests, music, food. She looked immaculate, of course. Sarah paused briefly, then continued, then the gift ceremony began. You know how much Mom loves to put on a show, to read every postcard aloud, to admire every little thing. I could hear Sarah catching her breath. Then she got to this box. Creamy, exquisite. Everyone froze. She even commented on how beautifully it was packaged. Well, in her style, you know. I could perfectly imagine this scene, Mom in the spotlight, wearing something expensive, sitting under the gazes of approval and envy. Radiant, as always. She started untying the ribbons. Sarah continued. She said how elegantly everything was done. And then she unfolded the first photo. Sarah was silent for a second, as if remembering. Samantha, I've never seen anyone's face change so quickly. She paled, then blushed. At first, everyone thought it was some kind of prank. And then she unfolded the next photo. And everything exploded. I closed my eyes, but I kept listening. There she was, kissing some man. And then, this man and his wife were at a party. Sarah's voice trembled. Your father, he grabbed a picture, then another one. And he began to unfold them one by one. Each one is worse than the previous one. First, a photo of them holding hands, then at the entrance to the hotel. Then with the elevator. That's it. Absolutely everything. I could almost hear her swallow before continuing. Your father, he lost control. He literally fell across the table, rushed at that man. They started fighting, right there, between the cake and the champagne. Martinez's wife, she started yelling at your mom. She called her every word she knew. I threw everything I could get my hands on into it, plates, glasses. She screamed that they had been married for 20 years. That they have 3 children. That your mom is a part-timer. Some of the guests tried to separate everyone, but it was just complete chaos. I imagined how this perfectly constructed scene would collapse, how in an instant my mother's whole life would turn into fragments. It sounds tense, I said carefully. Sarah lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Can I be honest? It was quite amazing. She paused, as if choosing her words. To see how your mother, who looked down on everyone for years, behaved as if she was better than all of us, always lectured us about proper behavior, about family values. And then, this. There was something strange in her voice, almost satisfaction. Hypocrisy, she muttered, then, as if giving up, she added, I know, I probably shouldn't say that, but it couldn't have happened to a more worthy person. I was silent, letting the words hang in the air. I thought about my mother, about her eternal struggle for perfection, about her disregard for me, about the careful picture she had been building for years, about precious friends from high society, about parties where I was superfluous. And now all of this, her image, her prestige, has shattered like champagne glasses that her lover's wife broke in a rage. I've been hearing from various relatives for several days. The rumors spread instantly. My father moved out of the house and stayed at a hotel. I've already contacted my lawyer. I was preparing the divorce papers. I wasn't surprised. Dad was always proud, even too proud. He couldn't forgive the public humiliation. But I was surprised by his call. He called a few days later, and his voice sounded different. It was as if he had aged years in those days. It was dull, faded, as if all the power had been drained out of it. "Samantha," he said, "I need to ask you something." Something tightened in my chest. "Of course," I replied, listening carefully to every word. He paused before continuing, "I'm going to do a DNA test. All three of you. I need samples of your hair and saliva." I froze. I didn't immediately understand what he said. But the meaning of his words was too obvious not to understand. "Do you think we might not exist?" I whispered. A long pause. Then, "I do not know what to think. After everything. I just need to know." I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. "Sure," I said. "You can come any time." He came the same day. I opened the door and barely recognized him. His shoulders were slumped, and his face was haggard. There was no usual severity in his eyes. He was broken, and that was the scariest thing of all. I suddenly saw not my father, but a man who was desperately trying to collect the remnants of his life. I watched him carefully collect the samples and put them in sterile containers. His hands were shaking, and he couldn't hide it. I didn't know what to say. Maybe there were no words. He left in silence. And he left behind a feeling of something irreversible. 2 weeks have passed. I tried not to think about it, but my thoughts kept coming back. I was asking questions that I didn't know the answers to. What was I waiting for? What was she hoping to hear? And so, the bell rang again. His voice was different. Tough. Restrained. "Can I come? We need to talk." 20 minutes later, he was sitting on my couch, staring at his hands. I waited. And when he finally looked up at me, he was tired. And the pain. "I got the results," he said. "You're mine. Only you." My throat was dry. "And Lisa and Harry?" I managed to say. He lowered his head. "They're not mine." His voice cracked. "Your mother," she confessed. "That was many years ago. She's having an affair. With the man she loved. He didn't leave the family for her. But she agreed to his terms. I agreed to his children. He died a few years ago." I felt the blood drain from my face. All these years. All this time. He trailed off, his shoulders slumping even lower. "I've cut off contact with the twins. I can't look at them. Every time I see them, I see lies. Betrayal." I didn't know what to say. "Everything is falling into place," he continued, smiling bitterly. "Why she was always softer towards them? Why were you a stranger in your own home? She loved him. And she loved his children. But not me. And not you." I froze. But he was looking right at me, and I could see the pure, sharp pain in his eyes. You were mine. That's why she pushed you away. Made you a stranger. And oh my God, Samantha. I let her. I let her turn me against you. My only real child. He clenched his hands, as if trying to hold back his own pain. Trying not to collapse completely. I know, he said, his voice breaking. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I was a terrible father. I let you down, I left you. But if you'd let me. He paused, as if afraid to speak further. I'd like to try. He lowered his head, his gaze fixed on his palms. I would like to have a relationship with my daughter. My real daughter. I looked at this broken man, my father, and felt a complex mix of emotions. Anger, pity, satisfaction, hope. All this has become entwined in me into a heavy, inseparable lump. I'll think about it, I finally said. That was all I could offer right now. There was too much to process, too much to let go. I tried to keep my head busy that week, but my thoughts kept coming back over and over again. How could it go like this? And why did I let this go on for so many years? The answer came on Tuesday. My phone lit up with a familiar number when I was at a work meeting. Excusing myself, I went out into the hallway and picked up the phone. I know it was you, the mother said without any preliminaries. Her voice was cold, restrained, but underneath that restraint, there was a trembling rage. A gift. Photo. All that. It was you. I didn't hesitate. Yes. It was me. Pause. There was a tense silence on the other end of the line. Then her voice lost control, and the pent-up anger broke through. How dare you? How dare you humiliate me like that? In front of everyone. I grinned, and that grin sent a pleasant chill through my chest. Do you want to talk about humiliation? I stepped closer to the window, watching the hustle and bustle of the street, as if trying to find a foothold in reality. How about spending your entire childhood as your personal servant? How about growing up with the belief that I'm not good enough for you? How about hearing that I'm not worthy of being at your birthday party because I don't have a college degree? She growled. No, Mom, my voice turned steely. It's not different. You've been humiliating me all my life. You turned your father against me. You let the twins treat me like a servant. You made me feel like I wasn't good enough to be a part of this family. But guess what? I'm the only one who really belongs to it. Pause. It was so long that I wondered if the bell had been disconnected. But then she spoke. Her voice was low and trembling. You've ruined everything. I closed my eyes, holding back the outburst of emotion. No, Mom. You're the one who ruined everything. I just revealed the truth. Maybe the next time you give a lecture on morality and decency, you'll remember your own actions. And I hung up before she could answer. The following months brought changes. Big, irreversible ones. The divorce was finalized quickly. Dad hired good lawyers, and the evidence of treason and the results of DNA analysis did their job. Mom tried to fight for most of the property, but she had no chance. As a result, she received modest compensation, which could hardly cover her ideas about the life of a rich divorced woman. The last time I heard, she went to another city. She hid where her name would no longer be synonymous with shame. Well, let it be. The further you go, the better. Family gossip spread, of course, instantly. But to my surprise, most of the relatives seemed pleased. It was as if this truth had finally lifted off a burden they had been carrying for years. She asked for it, Aunt Jane told me over coffee, shrugging her shoulders. She always looked down on everyone, as if we were all beneath her. You know, she once spent the entire Christmas dinner lecturing me on how I was not raising my children properly. Miss Great and Mighty, who preached about family values while she herself. She shook her head and chuckled. She got what she deserved. As for my father, we slowly began to build a new relationship. Real, for the first time in years. He started calling more often, and I invited him to dinner several times. It wasn't easy. At first, the conversations were strained and cautious. He was still struggling with everything that had happened, but I could see how gradually he was starting to let go of the pain. Sometimes he even smiled. A real smile, not a painful one, but one in which there was hope. We didn't talk about the twins. And not because they were trying to avoid this topic, it was just, there was no point in it. I haven't talked to them since it all came out. They tried to call at the beginning. Several times. But I blocked their numbers. What could they say? What could have been done to atone for the years of brutality? To erase the coldness with which they treated me, knowing that their mother was always behind them? Some might call it revenge. I call it justice. My mother spent years creating the perfect facade. Years to build an image of an impeccable woman, an exemplary mother, a keeper of family traditions. What about me? I was a second-class citizen in my own family. Superfluous. Unnecessary. All I did was show everyone who she really was. I took off the mask she was wearing so diligently. I didn't destroy her, she did it herself. Write a comment on what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.